Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever and wherever you're watching or listening. This is the Stochastic NHL DFS Strategy Show, and I am your host for today, Michael Clifford. Little bit of a different show today. Josh is dealing with some personal stuff, so he is not here today. Also, anybody that is a Stochastic member that has tried to use the website today knows that the website has been down all day. The developers are working on it currently. Obviously, we'll let everybody know as soon as it's back up. But no hockey projections, top stacks, those types of things. I think the NFL stuff is still up. I have it up on the screen here. So I think you can get to NFL and NBA and all that. But as far as NHL goes, tough break right now, but of course we'll get to that. We'll get to each game. I have all the salaries because I have my own stuff. I have all the salaries and whatnot for each line. But before we go too far, have to give a shout out to our boy Nihas. Took down the $12 SE last night. Nearly took down the $5 last night as well. Had a huge night. Really do love to see it. Haas has been part of Stochastic for years now, and him and Josh have known each other going back like a decade or whatever. So Haas always in the chat, always giving some primo cooking strategies, if you could say that. But he had a really good night last night, so congrats to him. We do love to see it. It was a nice little 4-game slate last night. A couple late buzzer beaters. Seems like that's been the theme this week across the NHL. What was it? Tuesday night, I think it's the first time ever 4 games were tied up in the final 15 or 25 seconds of the game or something like that. So crazy NHL week, but we have 13 games ahead of us. Don't want to waste too much time because, of course, we do have a lot to get through. So let's jump right into it. Obviously, we don't have the implied totals, team totals that we usually use for these. I'm going to a different source. I'm using Fantasy Labs. They are usually different from the ones we use. We usually use ours, get ours from Pinnacle. But when you're in a pinch, you're in a pinch. But that's how it goes. So we'll start with the first game. We have the Ottawa Senators with a 3.4 total. They're going into Columbus. Columbus has a 3.3 total. Fairly notable news here from Columbus. They're getting Boone Jenner back, and they're going back to the line configurations that they had earlier in the year when Jenner was healthy. That means Voronkov, Monahan, Marchenko, Jenner, Fantilli, Kent, Johnson on the second line. Now, that Columbus top line, 14,700, assuming it's going to be perfectly correlated on the power play. They were really good together to start this year. They were really good together last year. 3.9 expected goals per 60, nearly 170 minutes together. They usually don't take top matchups. So they're going to avoid the top matchups from Ottawa. I don't think the forward line matchups matter a whole lot. I do think avoiding the Sanderson pairing could be fairly important. So listen, Ottawa, very, very good defensive team. Obviously, Linus Ullmark hasn't been very good in net. I do believe it's is it Linus Ullmark? Yeah, Linus Ullmark got confirmed. I was just double checking that. Linus Ullmark confirmed to start. He hasn't been very good, obviously. Listen, we'll see how the ice time allotments go. But Marchenko typically plays in the high teens. Voronkov doesn't play a ton. Monahan will probably be in the high teens as well. Avoiding the Sanderson pairing, the Ottawa penalty kill has been very shaky this year. Columbus top power play unit, as currently constructed, 12 goals per 60 minutes. Listen, I really like Columbus one here. I don't know how popular they're going to be. Listen, this is a 13-game slate. I wouldn't be super concerned with ownership. I imagine they draw some ownership because at 14,700, perfectly correlated top line, getting good minutes, and I've been good at 5-on-5. I imagine they're going to get some ownership here, but I really do like Columbus one. It's a reasonable 5-on-5 matchup because I don't think they see a ton of the Sanderson pairing. It's a good power play matchup for them. Ottawa doesn't take a ton of penalties, 2.6 per game over the last 5 weeks. That's better than the league average. Columbus doesn't draw a ton of power plays, 2.5 per game over that 5-week stretch. But for under 15K, it's really hard to be mad about that. Like if you get one correlated goal and a shot bonus or something like that, like you're kind of laughing. If you get 2 correlated goals, like all of a sudden you're really in business. So I do like Columbus 1 here. You want to drop down to Columbus 2. They're only 11,300. They haven't been as good offensively. They don't get as much ice time. Fantilli will probably still be in the high teens. Kent Johnson obviously plays, 13, 14 minutes. Jenner somewhere in between. I think they're fine as a filler, but for me, I want to go to the big guys, especially with how cheap they are. So I would go to Columbus 1 here. On the Ottawa side, listen, Columbus, not a good defensive team, as we know. On the season, the Columbus Blue Jackets sit with the 4th worst expected goals against per 60, 7th worst goals against per 60. It's why Ottawa does have a higher total here. Assuming Ottawa runs back the same lines, they're going to have Stützle with Zetterlund and Cousins, Batherson and Dylan Cousins with Brady Tkachuk. The thing with Stützle with Zetterlund and Nick Cousins, it's like those guys don't get a ton of ice time. Like Cousins will probably play like 11, 12 minutes. Zetterlund maybe a couple minutes more. Stützle is going to be used all around the lineup. They're not a target of mine here, but I think Ottawa 2 is firmly in play. They're 17,500. That's a reasonable price play. Columbus's penalty kill, certainly nothing really to write home about. By expected goals against per 60 over the last 5 weeks, 8th worst in the league. Shot attempts against per 60 on the penalty kill over the last 5 weeks, they're 5th worst. So good power play matchup. I do like Ottawa 2 here. I don't think they're going to see very much ownership either, despite it being a good matchup, because it's 17,500. They're a little pricier. They're on the road. So I think Ottawa 2 is in play. For me, that'd be more MME. I do really like Columbus 1 here. All right, let's move along to our next game. Tampa Bay Lightning 3.2 total. New Jersey Devils 2.9 total. Columbus. Tampa Bay hasn't confirmed a goalie. I assume it's going to be Jonas Johansson. I just want to make a note that I do believe Andrei Vasilevsky is able to return from the IR if he's ready. Enough time has passed. It's just a matter of actually activating him. I imagine we'll get some news on that later. Thankfully, it's an early start, but Jacob Markstrom going on the other side. New Jersey's going to be without Timo Meier. He's taking a leave of absence from the team for some personal issues. Victor Hedman is on the injured reserve for Tampa Bay. So obviously there's a lot of big news here. Looks like New Jersey is going to run a top line of Nico Hischier, Jesper Bratt, and Stefan Noesen. And judging by the morning skate, they're going to be perfectly correlated on the power play. They're 15,200. Tampa Bay has typically had a good penalty kill this year. I was looking at New Jersey's power play with Nemitz running things, 8.3 expected goals, 6.5 actual goals. Remember, a lot of that is without Jack Hughes in the lineup. We talked on Tuesday, I believe it was, about how New Jersey's power play, their shot attempt rate had declined, obviously, since Jack Hughes has been out. I believe it was about 17%. So that they're not really doing a whole lot on the power play isn't a surprise. At 15,200, they're very playable here. The fact that Columbus is $500 cheaper just kind of makes me want to go to Columbus. So if you do want to use an expensive defenseman here tonight, there are a bunch of them. Obviously, Kale McCarr, Zach Werenski, Jacob Chychrun, those guys are all 7,400 or above. If you need a couple cheaper lines, I do think New Jersey 1 is something you can put into your lineups, especially if Vasilevsky isn't starting. But if I'm taking one or the other, I'm going to Columbus. That's just kind of the way I feel about that. The rest of New Jersey, I really doesn't do a whole lot for me. Like with Meier out, all of a sudden they're really relying on Gritsuk, who is moving to the top power play unit, by the way. So despite Gritsuk probably getting middle six slotting, He's only 3,100 with top power play exposure. So he's a fine one-off if you need a punt, but that's about it. I don't mind New Jersey, but again, where they're similar price to Columbus one, I'd rather just go to Columbus. The Tampa side is where things get interesting because there are only 4 lines on the board here tonight, priced over 20K. Those are Colorado, Tampa Bay, Carolina, and Edmonton. Tampa Bay top line, 20,800. We talked about it on Tuesday. Very, very good at 5-on-5 this year. Nearly 130 minutes together. 83 shot attempts, 5.2 expected goals per 60. Those are just, those are like bad power play numbers, and that's what they're doing at 5-on-5. They've just been tremendous. The thing is like Tampa Bay's kind of changed up their power plays. They did that thing where Cirelli and Hagel were on one, and then you had Gensel and Point on the other. Cirelli has been taken off the power play. At least he was in the last game. So now you don't get perfect correlation, and you only get Hagel on one of the units. So even though Kucherov plays both, you'll only get correlation when one of the units is on the ice. Tampa Bay's power play hasn't really been that great. Now, New Jersey's penalty kill the last 20 games has been the bottom 8 in the league, but they don't take a ton of penalties. So, listen, I think they're fine at 20,800, but Colorado one's only $1,900 more. That's kind of tough to kind of get past Colorado one at that price. So, like, I don't mind Tampa one in the single entry. They're the line excuse me, that I would play from Tampa, but pardon me, for me, I would go to Colorado. All right, our next game here, we have the Anaheim Ducks, quack, quack, our boys with a 3.2 total. They're going into New York to face the Islanders. The Islanders have a 3.2 total as well. Looks like Billy Husso for the Ducks and David Riddick for the Islanders. Now, on Tuesday's show, I believe it was Monday or Tuesdays, we talked about penalty kill might shape up for the rest of the season. And I bring that up for this reason, is that Anaheim's top 2 lines are both perfectly correlated on the power play. The top line on one unit, the second line on the other. The Anaheim power play, it's been up and down this year, but they're drawing a reasonable amount of opportunities over the last 5 weeks. They're at 2.9 per game, which is about league average over that 5-week span on the season. They're 5th in power play opportunities per game. So Anaheim does draw some power play opportunities. And again, just to bring up the chart that I showed the other day, these are the 4 goalies with the highest expected goals against rates in the league. Hildeby and Pickard 1 and 2, and then Sorokin and Riddick from the Islanders just behind them. That's important because for another graph here, I showed how expected goals against on the penalty kill early in the season led to really bad save percentages on the penalty kill later in the season. The red line is the average expected goals against through the first, I think it's 28 or 29 games of the season for each team last year. And then the save percentage for the rest of the year, you see Anaheim down, near 820, Seattle below average, the Rangers under 840, Minnesota under 840, Detroit, Nashville, St. Louis, Vegas. The only team that did well really was Winnipeg with Connor Hellebuck. So all of a sudden, the Islanders' penalty kill could look fairly shaky. And over the last 5 weeks, the Islanders' 3rd worst expected goals against on the PK, bottom 10 by shot attempts against per 60 on the PK, bottom 10 by shots against. What has saved them is goaltending, 947 save percentage, but I just showed how save percentage absolutely can crater when the team gives up a lot of quality on the penalty kill. So whether you want to go to Anaheim 1 or Anaheim 2 here, it's up to the individual. What I will say is that Anaheim 1, I was looking at their offensive numbers, the Carlson, Kreider, Terry line. Over their last 10 games, 2.7 expected goals per 60. Now they're scoring 4.3 goals per 60, which is nice to see, but the quality has really taken a hit. Anaheim 2, however, 14,600, 3.9 expected goals per 60 over their last 10 games. They're all playing like 17 to 18 minutes of late. They're perfectly correlated on the second power play units. You know, Mason McTavish, well over 2 shots per game over his last 10. We know how much Cutter Gauthier has been shooting the puck. I like both lines. I would probably lean to Anaheim 2 here. I think the case for Anaheim 1 is this. They'll probably see a fair bit of that Bo Horvat line, and with Shabanov on the top line, the Bo Horvat line, 75 shot attempts against, 4.5 expected goals against per 60 at 5-on-5 in 65 minutes together. They've been atrocious defensively. So there is a case for Anaheim 1 here. I do think they're one of those mid-price stacks. Like if you want to play a couple lines between like 15 and 18K, they're not right at the top of the list, but they're close to it. They'd be, you know, just a little bit behind Columbus, certainly ahead of New Jersey for me. I have no issues using Anaheim 1 here. I do think Anaheim 2, you know, save a little bit of money. They've been creating more offense lately. I think they're perfectly fine. On the Islanders side, I'm out on Islanders 1. Listen, I understand wanting to play them because you do get 2 guys on the top power play unit. Obviously, Bo Horvat has been on an absolute heater basically all year. The thing is like Shabanov really hasn't done a whole lot this year. Emil Heineman has 18 shots on goal in his last 12 games, 1.5 shots per game over his last 12. Only 1 goal in that span. You know, Bo Horvat obviously fine as a one-off or whatever, but that Islanders second line, 12,900 with Barzal, Lee, and Pajot. Lee and Barzal, 130 minutes together this year without Horvat or Palmieri on their line, 68 shot attempts, 3.3 expected goals per 60. Anders Lee, even without top power play time, 2.7 shots per game over his last 10. That Islanders second line at 12,900 against a Ducks team that gives up a ton of shots, against a Ducks team that takes a ton of penalties. You get Barzal on the top power play unit. I really do like Islanders 2 here because I think they're a nice filler if you want to use, you know, with one of the Dallas lines or one of the Toronto lines or something like that. You can still get in a fairly expensive defenseman to go with them. So for me, I think I lean both second lines here. Clearly, I favor the Anaheim line. I do think the Islanders second line is a nice filler. Anaheim 1, no issues there. All right. Game number 4, Vegas going into Philly. Vegas has a 3.1 total. The Philadelphia Flyers have a 2.6 total. It's Akira Schmid for Vegas, Dan Vladar for the Flyers. You know, both the Flyers lines as currently constructed have been fairly productive together. I noticed the Zegras line with Konechny there, you know, Zegras, Dvorak, Konechny, fairly good offensive numbers, 65 shot attempts, 4.2 expected goals per 60, perfectly correlated on the power play together. They're probably going to see a fair bit of the Jack Eichel line. I was looking at that Eichel line's last 10 games, 120 minutes together with Bowman and Barbashev, 61 shot attempts, 2.7 expected goals against per 60. Those are not good defensive numbers. The problem is like that Philly top line's at 14,700. It's the same price as Columbus 1. It's $100 more expensive than the Anaheim second line that we just talked about. You know, they're playable. I just think that there are better lines or similar lines in the same price range in better spots that I'd rather go to. Kind of just out on the Flyers here. On the Vegas side, not really a great matchup for them. Flyers don't take a ton of penalties, better than league average. Flyers penalty kill has been about league average over their last 20 games. So if you want to do like an Eichel, Stone, Marner stack, you know, that we always talk about, Marner and Stone have been very good together at 5-on-5, 70 shot attempts, 3.4 expected goals per 60. You know, Marner not shooting the puck a ton, not producing a ton, but he's not priced like it either. Eichel has 14 points and 3.5 shots per game over his last 10. So I would want to get him in any sort of Vegas stack I have. So I would probably do like Eichel, Marner, and Stone, like we mentioned on a previous show, but I'm not going to take a whole lot of time here just because we have 9 more games to get through. This is a 5.5 total on a slate filled with 6.5 totals. Like if you get to some Vegas or some Philly, in your 150 maxes or whatever, even a 20 max. I think it's okay. Single entry or something like that. I just, with so many games and so many higher totals and so many teams and so many better spots, I just think that this is one that we can just move along from. One we're not just going to move along from is Montreal with a 3.3 total going into Pittsburgh. The Pittsburgh Penguins have a 3.4 total. Montreal called up Jacob Fowler, prospect goalie from the AHL. He's going to start. He's going to be going up against Tristan Jarry. Now, Clayton asked in our chat, what about Jacob Fowler? And he's a good prospect goalie. He's still stuck behind the Montreal defense. The Montreal defense, yeah, they had, first few weeks of the season, they were pretty good. I think basically since the Caden Gooley injury, it's just been a downward trajectory. I have no confidence in the Montreal defense. Like it's one of those things where if Montreal really keeps the goals against down, they're either going to have to turn in a defensive effort that they really haven't done much of for almost 2 months now, or Fowler, just goes nuts, saves like 34, 35 shots or something like that. So this is a pretty good spot for the Penguins. Pittsburgh top line. I was looking at, because Tommy Novak, good old Tommy, he's been skating on the top line with Crosby and Brian Rust. And, Novak is a guy, he had a couple pretty good seasons in Nashville. Over a 2-year span in 122 games, he had 88 points. That works out to almost 60 points every 82 games. Couldn't find his way on a bad Nashville team last year. Didn't get much time with Pittsburgh before being injured when he got traded last year. 14 points in 28 games with the Penguins so far this season, but he has 3 goals and 2 assists in his last 4 games. Skating his last 2 games, he's skated or averaged 18 minutes a game skating on the top line. Novak and Crosby only 40 minutes together this season, but 75 shot attempts, 4.8 expected goals per 60. Crosby and Rust have been skating around 20 minutes a game. The Montreal penalty kill, not anything to write home about. Montreal has been slowly taking fewer penalties after being very undisciplined. Basically for all of November, or for late October and most of November. So I don't know what the Pittsburgh power play is going to look like if Evgeny Malkin is out for an extended period. But that Pittsburgh top line, not very expensive here tonight, which is probably one of the reasons why you might want to consider them. They're only 16,900. Very good 5-on-5 matchup, decent power play matchup. I don't mind Pittsburgh 1 here. What I hate taking guys off of a 5-on-5 line, but Ben Kindle's only $600 more expensive than Novak, and if you add in Ben Kindle, that line 17,500, perfectly acceptable price. Then that trio would be perfectly correlated. Ben Kindle, 27 shots on goal over his last 10 games. This is a guy that's been playing all over the lineup. He's been one of the more impressive rookies this season, to be honest. So if you want to take out Novak and put in Kindle, I think you can do that. But I do like Pittsburgh 1 here. Pittsburgh 2 is kind of interesting just because of their price. I call the second line Kindle, McGroarty, Koivunen, $9,400. Koivunen and Kindle together this season, over 115 minutes together. 79 shot attempts, 4.2 expected goals per 60. Now, they're shooting under 3%, so they haven't scored a ton, but they are generating a ton. Like I said, Kindle, 27 shots in his last 10 games. So at 9,400, like if you're playing Colorado or Edmonton power play or something like that, I think this Pittsburgh second line going up, like getting those second and third line matchups from Montreal, those are great matchups for them to really generate a lot of offense. Like, listen, I watched that Penguins game on Tuesday night when they lost to the Ducks. They lost, last 0.1 second tie game and then lost in extra time. But that second line was basically creating at will against Anaheim. And if they can do that against the Ducks, now the Ducks not a great defensive team, but they play to a pretty fast pace and they couldn't keep up with them. So I do like that Pittsburgh second line as a filler. You want to just use like Kindle and Koivunen or Kindle and McGarty or something as a two-man. I think that's fine. I might lean Pittsburgh too, just because of what I might do elsewhere with my lineup, but both Pittsburgh top lines certainly in play here. Montreal, like, listen, they're leaving it for now. They still have Zach Bolduc on the top line. They're up to over 75 minutes with Bolduc on the top line. 2.2 expected goals for, 3.7 against. They're getting crushed. Now, they're perfectly correlated on the power play, but the Pittsburgh penalty kill has had pretty good metrics for most of the season. And if you look over the last 5 weeks, fourth lowest expected goals against per 60 in the league on the penalty kill. So even with a high save percentage, they're keeping the quality down. That Montreal top line, 16,900. They're only a couple $100 more expensive than the Anaheim top line that we just talked about. We'll get to, there are Detroit lines. We talked about Ottawa, only $600 more expensive. I don't know. I'm kind of out on Montreal here tonight. I think Pittsburgh, they're the better team. Obviously, they've been playing better lately as well. For me, this game is about using Pitt 2 as a filler. If you want to go to Pittsburgh 1, no issue with that. But this is a Penguins game, not a Montreal game for me. All right, moving on. Brandon says McGarty 5 shots on goal last game. I'm pretty sure he had 4 of those shots in the first period. Not being hyperbolic about that. I think between them, they had 10 shots. That line had 10 shots in the first period or something like that. It was nuts. Like, they were literally skating circles around Anaheim. All right, getting to our next game. San Jose with a 2.8 total. Going into Toronto has a 3.9 total. Now, this is interesting. Because it's crazy. I mean, it's probably just a coincidence, but we know the Toronto Maple Leafs have generally had their issues defensively. By shot attempts against over their last 10 games, they're still bottom 8 in the league. Expected goals against at 5-on-5 in their last 10 games, they're 7th in the league. Their goals against per 60, 4th in the league. And those 10 games are since they added Troy Stecher. Now, I don't think Troy Stecher is the cure-all here, but I do think he's kind of an underrated player, and Toronto is a team that's been activating their defensemen more. I just think it gives them another option on the blue line to move the puck, which is something that team didn't really have among their defensemen, right? You have Ekman Larson and Morgan Riley, but other than that, pretty sparse for puck movers. I don't think it's a coincidence that, Troy Stecher playing almost 24 minutes a game over his last 4-5 games coincides with Toronto getting better defensively at 5-on-5. Listen, San Jose, they've been able to score this year, but I was looking at Celebrini's top line numbers with Colin Graff as his winger. 42 shot attempts, 2 expected goals per 60. Those are just terrible offensive numbers. Now, maybe they do something on the power play, because the Sharks are drawing a lot of power play opportunities. 3.8 per game over the last 5 weeks. It's the most in the league. 3.6 per game over the course of the season, also the most in the league. And we know the Toronto penalty kill has struggled. Again, those were one of the teams that I talked about on Tuesday for a penalty kill issues moving forward. Dennis Hildeby, most expected goals against per 60 on the penalty kill in the league this season. Their other 3 goalies, all worse than league average. This has not been a good penalty killing team. They've been saved by their goaltending. Maybe the Sharks get there on the penalty kill, but Celebrini is the only guy on his line on the top power play. So if you want to take out, if you want to go to the San Jose second line, which is perfectly correlated, you just use Eklund and Toffoli and add in Celebrini. That line is only 16,200. That's a pretty reasonable price, going into Toronto. Not a great 5-on-5 matchup, I don't think, but a very good power play matchup. And listen, matching up against the Matthews line, it's the one line that has really struggled defensively, even with Stecher in the lineup. 3.4 expected goals against per 60 with Domi on the wing. I don't hate San Jose here. I would be pretty tempted to take out Wenberg and just put in Celebrini and make it more of a primary stack than a filler stack like you would with Wenberg, because I don't think I'm making it. I'm not making a San Jose stack with the power play in mind and leaving Macklin Celebrini off. I would still prefer to play a team like Anaheim or Columbus, but I do think you have to consider San Jose here, because if they get 4 or 5 power play opportunities, even with John Klingberg running things, they probably can cash in at least one. So don't mind San Jose power play here, but they're not a stack that I'm running out to play. The bigger problem is what to do with Toronto, I think, because both of Toronto's lines are over 18K, but under 19K here tonight. Toronto 2, 18,500. Toronto 1, 18,300. Both have 2 guys on the top power play unit. Not ideal, because, do you want to stack the top line and then not play William Nylander? Do you want to stack the second line and not play Austin Matthews? Listen, that second line with Easton Cowan there, 3 expected goals per 60 minutes. Cowan's still playing around 16 minutes a game, even without top power play time. Nylander, Tavares, around 18 to 19 minutes. The thing is I kind of prefer the Matthews line here for this reason. One, as bad as they are defensively, they've been good offensively with Max Domi there. 3 expected goals per 60 minutes. You get 2 out of 3 guys on the top power play, but matched up against the Celebrini line, 83 shot attempts, 3.9 expected goals against per 60. And don't forget, Yaroslav Askarov was sick, so he missed the last game, and he's not starting here tonight. He's going to be the backup, but he's not starting. It's going to be Nedeljkovic, and Nedeljkovic has not been anywhere close to Askarov's level this year. It's a good goaltending matchup. San Jose does take a lot of penalties. Not like the Toronto power play has been very good, but they should get 3 or 4, maybe 5 cracks on the power play. They could, be nice if they could convert once. I go to the Austin Matthews line here. Now, if you want to take off Domi and put in Nylander, make it a really expensive stack, I guess you can. At that point, though, I'm probably just going to play Colorado or something. So this is a case where I just stick with the even strength stack. For me, it's Toronto 1, San Jose power play. That's kind of my interest in this game. Brandon says Nylander has been kind of cold. I mean, I think that's putting it a little bit mildly. I was looking over his last 10 games. 20 shots on goal. It's really not that great. He has 7 points, 3 goals in that span. On the season, William Nylander is at 2.1 shots per game. He averaged at least 3.1 shots per game for 4 straight years, and he averaged like 3.5 shots per game over the prior 2 seasons. His shot volume has absolutely crashed. Shooting 21% will help the goal total, but he's not putting up any shot volume. Tavares is. I would just go to Toronto 1. I don't think Matthews is quite the player that he was, 2 or 3 years ago. He looks like he just really needs to get healthy, but Toronto 1's in a very good 5-on-5 matchup, decent power play matchup, as good as it can get for the Leafs. So that's where my interest is. Toronto 1, San Jose power play. Moving along, Battle of the Metro. Probably the 2 best teams in the Metro. I don't think there's any probably about it, actually. But we have the Carolina Hurricanes with a 3.4 total. They're going into Washington. The Washington Capitals have a 3.3 total. Brandon Bussy going for Carolina. He hasn't been like a world beater, he's been good, not great. But with the way that Carolina limits shots against, you don't need to be great. 2.1 goals against per game in Bussy's 10 starts, and that's with a save percentage under 910. 909 save percentage is good. It's above average. It's not elite. But Carolina just does such a good job at limiting shots that he's not really giving up a ton. Bussy, he hasn't given up more than 4 goals in a game yet this season. And he's given up 1 or fewer in 4 out of his 10 starts. Now, those are against lesser teams, San Jose, Winnipeg, Calgary. But, he only gave up 3 to Dallas. He only gave up 2 to the Islanders. So like he's played well enough where it makes a difference that he's starting and not Frederik Andersen. All that said, Washington going with a top line of Ovechkin, Strome, and Connor McMichael. Sort of came back in their last game. He's on the second line with Tom Wilson and Alexei Protas. John Carlson, game time decision for Washington. He may be in. If he's not, Jacob Chickering, 7,400 now. He's super priced up, but he might be in line for 23, 24, maybe 25 minutes. He's averaging 23 a game as it is anyway. The Washington top line, I looked at their numbers without Protas or Beauvillier, still at 3 expected goals for per 60. They're probably going to avoid the top line matchup. The thing is like that Carolina top line hasn't been very good defensively. Like this is almost a spot where you'd want Ovechkin and Strome to go out against the Aho line. Carolina's not taking a lot of penalties. That's one of the things that's really holding me back here. Carolina, 2.4 times shorthanded per game over the last 5 weeks. It's tied for the 3rd lowest rate in the league. They're better than league average on the season as a whole. Washington's power play has been a lot better under the 4 forward, 1 defenseman setup, but I'm not totally sold that they're going to get a ton of power play opportunities. I would probably drop down to Washington 2 here. Protas, Sordiff, Wilson. 14,400. They're right in that Columbus 1 range. I would rather play Columbus, but I do think Washington 2 firmly in play here. This season, 74 shot attempts, 4.6 expected goals per 60. Protas, only 21 shots in his last 10 games, but he's really started to come alive offensively after a little bit of a slump. Goals in 4 of his last 5. So I don't mind Washington 2 here. They're going to see some of the shutdown matchup against Carolina 1. Carolina won their last 10 games, 2.7 expected goals against. That's below average defensively. So certainly don't mind Washington 2 here as a mid-price stack. That's where my attention is on their side. On the Carolina side, it's probably Carolina 1. But I think I would actually just drop to Carolina 2. And the reason is this. 1, Carolina 2 is not going to see much of that Sordiff line. And the Sordiff line, 43 shot attempts, 1.8 expected goals against per 60. Those are great defensive numbers. So Stankoven and Ehlers and Jackson Blake are not going to see much of that matchup. The other is with Carolina's power play struggling a bit, they have been giving that second unit some more power play time, like 35-40% of the power play share. And that second line for Carolina perfectly correlated on the second unit. Washington's penalty kill, not very good. 1, they do take their fair share of penalties, 3.2 times shorthanded per game over the last 5 weeks. It's 8th most in the league. If you look at the season as a whole, worse than league average in times shorthanded per game. The penalty kill itself, not really that great either. The Caps penalty kill, 9.3 expected goals against per 60 over the last 5 weeks. It's the 22nd ranked penalty kill by that metric. The goaltending hasn't held up. So it's not a bad power play spot for Carolina, but the top unit has been kind of a mess. The second line at 14K, I think they're a lower mid-price line that is very playable here. So where they're going to avoid the Sordiff line, perfectly correlated on the power play, getting decent power play time. Like I said, 35 to 40% of the power play share, 2.7 expected goals per 60 over the last 10 games. I like Carolina 2 here. So for me, it's a matchup of the second lines. I would go Washington 2 and then Carolina 2, but I think both are very playable here. Just kind of watch that it is Logan Thompson starting, not Charlie Lindgren. So we always say it is a tougher start with Thompson in over the last couple of years, but a half goal less per game for Washington in Thompson starts. But don't mind Carolina 2, but I think it's Washington 2 that I prefer here. Michael had asked, talking about Toronto, is Riley playing? He was on the ice for skate today, so I'm assuming he's playing after missing that time, that practice with an illness. But as always, be sure to check when warm-ups start. All right. Dallas, 3.0 total going into Minnesota. Minnesota has a 2.6 total. Minnesota without Matt Zuccarello, so they're moving Tarasenko to the top line. Here's the thing. I was looking at Minnesota's top line numbers without Matt Boldy. 50 shot attempts, 2.4 expected goals per 60. It's not very good. Those are below average numbers, and that's very Kirill Kaprizov line. Playing with Danilo Yurov and Vladimir Tarasenko, I don't think is really going to juice those numbers. Maybe if this was 2019 with Tarasenko, that's one thing. 2025, certainly not. So I'm out on Minnesota 1. Minnesota 2, 2.8 expected goals, 59 shot attempts per 60. Boldy and Eriksson play over 20 minutes a game. Even Marcus Johansson's been getting about 18 minutes a game. They are reasonably expensive, though, $17,200. The problem is like Dallas has a fairly good penalty kill. Minnesota's power play is quite bad. I mean, with Brock Faber running the power play, Minnesota's top power play unit is at 76 shot attempts against per 60. They're about as good on the power play with Faber as the Washington second line is at 5-on-5. It's not been pretty. So with Dallas actually having a good penalty kill, over the last 5 weeks, the Dallas Stars 7.2 expected goals against per 60. It's the 6th best rate in the league. Goals against much lower as the goaltending's been solid. So, till Minnesota really starts showing signs of life on the power play. If this was like a 7 or 8 game slate, then I would start giving consideration. But listen, I think there's like 11 or 12 lines between 16 and 18K alone. I don't think there's any reason to run out and play Minnesota here. On the Dallas side, they did that thing again last game where Sam Steele started the game on the top line with Johnston and Rantanen. About 3 shifts in, Matt Duchene got moved up with him, and then they moved Steele back, I believe, for a good chunk of the third period. Kind of annoying. What I will say is the Hint, Robertson, Jamie Benn line. Not a big sample yet, just over 45 minutes, but 65 shot attempts, 4 expected goals per 60. They're not going to see much of the Minnesota Joel Eriksson, Marcus Johansson shutdown line, I don't think. They're reasonably expensive, though, at 18K. Like, they're priced right up there with the Toronto lines, the Detroit top line that we'll get to later. I guess they're fine, but I would probably just rather, do I want to play Dallas on the road in Minnesota, or do I want to play Toronto at home against San Jose is kind of the way I look at it. So I would still prefer the Matthews line. Like, Dallas is fine here, but again, like Philly and Vegas, this is a game with a 5.5 total on a slate filled with games that have 6.5 totals. So if you get there in MME, your 20 max, especially your 150, I guess it's fine. I don't mind the Robertson line just because they've shown some signs of life in a small sample, but this is not a game where I'm running out to play either side. The Minnesota penalty kill has improved a lot after a tough time earlier in the season. 7 expected goals against per 60 over the last 5 weeks. That's the 3rd lowest rate in the league. Shot attempts against, also the 3rd lowest rate. So it's not really a good power play matchup for Dallas, especially when Minnesota doesn't take a ton of penalties. So this is one where I'm probably passing on both sides in single entry. It's more of an MME game for me, especially with that 5.5 total sitting there. Michael Peterson says Kaprizov and the boat anchors. Yeah, they're doing that thing that Vegas is basically doing Jack Eichel, which is like put like your 6th and 7th best wingers with them, and then put your better wingers with your weaker centers to try to balance your lines out. Problem is like Yurov and Tarasenko just aren't good enough to skate with Kaprizov at this point. Speaking of 5.5 totals, our next game, St. Louis Blues, 2.7 total going into Nashville. Nashville has a 2.9 total. We're probably not going to get goalie confirmations on this game. We never get goalie confirmations from Nashville. I always just assume it's UC Saros unless we hear otherwise.
St. Louis has been kind of rotating their goalies a bit, at least over the last few games. That would mean it's probably Jordan Binnington's turn, especially where Hofer got lit up against Boston. But I assume it's Binnington against Saros, but we don't have confirmation on either side. So the Nashville top line is currently constructed with Stamkos, Evangelista, and Ryan O'Reilly. 61 shot attempts, 3.8 expected goals per 60. Those are very good offensive numbers. Neither of the Dallas top two lines probably going to be anything special defensively. St. Louis top line, 2.9 expected goals against. The second line, 2.7 expected goals against. Not really a lot to speak of there. Both penalty kills have been good over the last 5 weeks. I don't really stack Nashville for the power play anyway. That Nashville top line, the reason why I'm kind of interested here is that they're 12K. 12K at home, very good 5-on-5 matchup. Getting, at the low end, Evangelista around 16 minutes, Stamkos in between him and Ryan O'Reilly, where O'Reilly's at 20 plus. At 12K, they're playable. I wonder if they come in fairly chalky just because they are 12K. But at $12,000, it's hard to complain. The Columbus second line is right in that price range. We talked about the super cheap Pittsburgh second line, not that far down. I'd rather play the Islanders second line that we talked about earlier, the Barzal, Pajot, Anders Lee line. They're only $900 more expensive, but I do think Nashville 1 is playable here. Not in on Nashville 2. Until they get Philip Forsberg away from Eric Holla, I'm out. On the St. Louis side, it's top line or bust. That second line, I was looking at their numbers without Jordan Kyrou. 43 shot attempts, 1.6 expected goals per 60. It is terrible. So I'm out on St. Louis 2. It's St. Louis 1 or nothing for me. St. Louis top line is an even 13K. And one thing I do want to show is about Jake Neighbors. Now, this is a graph of players who've improved both their share of shot attempts and share that's on your x-axis and share of expected goals on your y-axis. The share that they take when they're on the ice, these are the improvements compared to the last 2 years. Jake Neighbors, one of the biggest expected goals improvements of any forward in the league. And, certainly in the top, 20% of improvements by shot attempts. So he's been taking more of the shots, which I guess is probably the guy you want taking the shots on the top line. Like Robert Thomas certainly doesn't shoot a lot. Pavel Buchnevich, frankly, looks kind of busted. But, Nashville has been better defensively. The St. Louis power play, as currently constructed, has been better, at least around league average. So that's something. Listen, at 13K, I'm not going to say don't play St. Louis, but that Islanders top line's $100 cheaper. They're right there. So for me, it's both top lines in this game. I would honestly probably lean St. Louis, but these are fillers for my MME lineups. I don't think this is another 5.5 game where I don't think I'm necessarily terribly interested in either side. All right. Niehaus with the super chat. Thank you very much, Niehaus. Certainly appreciate it. The $50 super chat says, thanks for all your hard work, Cliffy. I mean, it is my job. I'm here to try to, Josh and I are here to try and help in any way we can. Don't forget that you guys are still the ones making the lineup, and the projections come from Stochastic, not from us. We're just here to really relay the information. But it was nice to see your hit. Hopefully get a couple more of those under your belt before the end of the season. We still have, 50 some games left. So thanks for the super chat. Really appreciate the support. Go get another one tonight. Go get it on a heater house. We would love to see it. All right, moving along. Next game, Boston, 2.6 total going into Winnipeg. Winnipeg has a 3.1 total. Now, Eric Comrie starting for Winnipeg. I didn't have a ton of interest in the Jets until the Boston Bruins made it be known that it's going to be Joonas Korpisalo and not Jeremy Swayman. I say that because on the season, at least by Evolving Hockey's numbers, Jeremy Swayman is quite literally saving over 1 goal per game for the Bruins. Joonas Korpisalo, meanwhile, is at about is under 0.1 goals saved per game for the Boston Bruins. It is a pretty huge gap between the two goalies. Now, Charlie McAvoy is officially a game time decision for Boston. Remember, he got his face broken by a block shot, an unintentional block shot against Montreal a couple weeks back. He's a game time decision. Obviously, that would help out the Bruins. But the reason I don't really have a ton of interest in the Winnipeg top line is they broke it up, right? You know, we talked about on Tuesday how the top line not the same without Velarde. We mentioned the numbers over the last couple of years. Well, just this year alone, Winnipeg's top line, 2.5 expected goals for per 60 at 5-on-5 without Gabriel Velarde. That's basically league average. Now, Alex Iafallo played over 21 minutes in their last game. So this is probably a Winnipeg top line that is going to get a ton of minutes. They're 16,900, so they're priced right in line with Montreal, with Pittsburgh, with Anaheim. They do get a solid power play matchup because Boston is taking a lot of penalties. Boston 3.5 times shorthanded per game over the last 5 weeks. It's the most in the league. 3.7 times shorthanded per game on the season. Again, the most in the league. So, you know, a good Winnipeg power play. Probably going to see a fair bit of ice time here at 16,900. That's why I think they're playable, because it's a good power play matchup for them, and they're getting the much weaker goalie to face. So I really don't mind Winnipeg one here, but at the same price as Anaheim, at the same price as Pittsburgh, at the same price as Montreal, I don't feel the need to run out and play him. For me, it's more of a 20 max thing. On the Boston side, Michael Peterson asks, Brandon asks, passes on the third line. We don't have official confirmation on the Bruins lines, but that's where he was in the last game. And considering they won 5-2, I don't think they're going to change it. It's one of those things where Boston's been on a pretty good streak. You know, they won a bunch of games without Pasternak. Like, I think they won 3 or 4 games with Pasternak out of the lineup. Pasternak comes back. They don't want to rock the boat, so they put him on the third line, and then they go out and win 5-2. If Winnipeg is ahead 3-0 at the start of the second period, then yeah, I see David Pasternak moving back up. But if this game is close, or if Boston has a lead, like if Boston's up 2-0 halfway through the second period, I don't see why they would change anything. To me, it seems like one of those things that they're not going to change the lines until they start losing some games, or, you know, they're down big or something like that. So that's one of the reasons why I don't really have interest in Boston here. It's like, do I stack a Boston line without David Pasternak? Like, I guess you can. You know, they did put up 5 goals in their last game. Fraser Midden had 2 goals and David Pasternak had 3 assists. Like, do I want to go back to a Midden Pasternak 2-man? Like, go with God, but it's not for me. Like, until David Pasternak is back with some playable players, I'm just kind of out on Boston here. I think the second line, if anything, would be where I would go. I guess maybe they're listed as a third line, but Zaka Arvidsson and Middlestat, 11K. At least they're around league average offensively. But until these lines change, there's nothing I want to stack out, right? I think Pasternak makes a fine one-off. You want to just make a super expensive Pasternak one-off. Very, very into that, but full stacking, I'm out. So for me, it's Winnipeg 1 in that game. All right. Getting to the late ones. Detroit, 2.8 total. They're going into Edmonton. The Edmonton Oilers have a 3.9 total. Detroit played last night. They won last night 4-3, though they were up 4-0 halfway through the third period. And then Calgary reeled off 3 goals, and it looked like they might tie it late. But John Gibson held the fort. Because Gibson started last night, I imagine it's going to be Cam Talbot tonight, although, of course, that's not confirmed. Stuart Skinner starting for Edmonton. The news is, big news here for me is Simon Edvinsson out for Detroit. He didn't he's not going to be playing here tonight. Edvinsson got hurt in the second period last night, didn't play the third period. I mean, we see guys leave games on it, and then, you know, they have a back-to-back. And I should make the note they were up 4-0 when he got hurt. So maybe it's, you know, precautionary, and then they'll put him in the lineup here. But I'm assuming Edmonton's not going to be in the lineup here tonight. And that's kind of important because when Detroit has Evason and Moritz Seider off the ice, their expected goals and actual goals against at 5-on-5 are 3.2. With them on the ice, both are under 2. So expected goals against under 2, goals against actually under 1.8. With them off the ice, both over 3.2. Like terrible, terrible defensive numbers. I mentioned that because obviously Evason is probably not going to be playing. So Seider, he can only play so much. I imagine he's going to play probably well north of 25 minutes here tonight. But even though Edmonton's top line might see a fair bit of the Seider matchup, they play so much, and Detroit has to play their other defensemen at some point that I don't mind the matchup here for Edmonton 1. The Edmonton top line, 20,300, Hyman, McDavid, Nugent, Hopkins, perfectly correlated. One note, I do some editing over at the season-long fantasy website, Dollar Hockey, and one note that one of the writers made today is that Edmonton is actually drawing a fair amount of power plays at home, 3.2 per game. It's just that on the road, they're only drawing 2.0. So the fact that they're drawing a reasonable amount of power play opportunities on the road is a good sign. Detroit, middle of the road by expected goals against per 60 on the penalty kill over the last 5 weeks. And like with Edmonton's power play as good as it is, like they can shred absolutely anybody. Of the lines above 20K, I still think I prefer to play Colorado. We'll get to them in a second. But if you don't want to pay $22,700 for Colorado, I would rather play Edmonton than Carolina, and I'd rather play Edmonton than Tampa Bay. So I think Edmonton 1 firmly in play here. Hyman only has 21 shots in his last 10 games. He really doesn't look like the player he was a couple years ago, but perfectly correlated on the power play. I do think it's hard to pass up. I really do like Edmonton 1 here. Problem is, like, do you leave Leon Draisaitl out of the stack or do you just add him in? I think you can just add in Draisaitl because, again, we mentioned Boston 2, Pittsburgh 2. There are some really cheap fillers. There's even one in the late Buffalo-Vancouver game I'll get to that I think is playable. So I do think there are some really cheap fillers you can use with an Edmonton power play stack. So, if you want to leave off Bouchard, that's fine. But I would probably just use the 4 Edmonton power play forwards. If you want to dip down to Edmonton 2, I guess that's okay at 14,400. 3.4 expected goals per 60. Vasily Podkolzin, almost 2 shots per game over his last 8 games. So he's been doing some work offensively. Obviously, Matt Savoy had that 2-goal game recently. So I think they're playable. But for me, I would just use the 4 Edmonton power play forwards. If you want to Josh stack it and just add in one of Savoy or Podkolzin, I think that's fine. But I think it's a fine, good 5-on-5 matchup, especially with Edmonton out, and a solid power play matchup for Edmonton as well. On the Detroit side, I mentioned the other day Edmonton's penalty kill issues. Those penalty kill issues still persist. Calvin Pickard, Stuart Skinner, both worse than expected goals against per 60 on the PK this year. The defense in front of them has not been stellar. So there are worries for the rest of the season. There are worries for the rest of the season. So I'm not super into the Edmonton penalty kill. They don't take a ton of penalties, but they are worse than league average over the last 5 weeks. I honestly don't mind Detroit 1 here. Problem is they're 18,100 on the road, on a road back-to-back, and they're not perfectly correlated. I guess neither is Toronto or Dallas. I would rather play Detroit than Dallas, but I think I would rather play the Austin Matthews line at home against San Jose than Detroit 1 on the road against Edmonton. So I think Detroit's top 2 lines are both playable here. But even Detroit 2 at 16K, like Anaheim, $700 more expensive. Montreal, Pittsburgh, and Winnipeg, only $900 more expensive. Columbus, $1,300 cheaper. So, like, I just think there are other spots in that price range I'd rather go to. For me, this is an Edmonton game, obviously, with a 3.9 total. It's hard to get away from them. So it's the Edmonton power play, guys. Again, if you want to make it a Josh stack, add in Podkolzin or Savoy, no issues there. All right, pretty big game next. Florida, 2.7 total. They're going into Colorado. Colorado has a 4.0 total. Bobrovsky went last night for Florida in their 4-3 win in Utah, so I imagine it'll be Danil Tarasov here tonight. The Colorado top line over the last 10 games, 4 expected goals, 85 shot attempts. Like, they're not slowing down. The power play hasn't been great. It's been a little bit better with Gabriel Landeskog, but they play so many minutes. Like, their last 5 games, like all between 21 and 23 minutes. They're going to be matched up against the Florida top line, and the Florida top line that they ran in last night's game was Sam Bennett, Carter Verhaeghe, and Brad Marchand. That line this year for Florida, 3.6 expected goals against per 60. Like, whichever line Brad Marchand has been on has been very great offensively. Don't get me wrong, but very poor defensively. If they're poor defensively against this Colorado top line, McKinnon, Necas, and Lehkonen are just going to eat them alive. I really do like Colorado one here, 22,700. They're expensive, but again, whether it's the Pittsburgh second line or the Columbus second line, Boston second line, you could even probably do the Nashville top line if you wanted. There are cheap spots. Buffalo second line, we'll get to that in a second. There are cheap spots you can go to. I'm not playing the Colorado second line at 13,400. I just think it's too expensive. Florida penalty kill has not tremendous or anything. I want to get the power play guys in. I know McKinnon is super expensive, but the wingers really aren't. That's one thing that kind of balances it out. Is Necas is only 6,700, Lehkonen's only 5,800. So at 22,700, I think that top line is very playable. It's when they get to 24 or 25K. But what I will say is what I always say on a slate this big, I rarely pay up for lines that expensive on a 13-game slate. There are just way too many lines that can break a slate that are $5,000 cheaper that you can go to. So it's one of those things, if this was a 7-gamer, I'd probably just lock and load Colorado. On a 13-gamer, again, just my personal preference. I don't usually play lines that expensive, but they've been great at 5-on-5. It's a really good 5-on-5 matchup. So it is what it is. On the Florida side, what I will mention, again, like I said, most Brad Marchand lines have been great offensively this year. This Bennett, Verhaeghe, Marchand line, no exception. 79 shot attempts, 4.2 expected goals per 60. They're all on the, quote, top power play unit. Colorado's penalty kill started great, been on a little bit of a slide. By expected goals against per 60 over the last 5 weeks, Colorado penalty kill 23rd by expected goals against. Even their goals against, basically middle of the league over the last 5 weeks. Florida power play has been a lot better. We always talk about with the 4-forward setup. Perfectly correlated on the top line. That Florida top line is 17,600. Listen, road back-to-back going into Colorado is a really tough spot. Colorado top line's been playing, Mike Peterson kind of said it, pond hockey. Their last 10 games, 63 shot attempts against, 3.3 expected goals against per 60. Now they're getting 966 goaltending behind them, so they're not giving up many goals, but they're giving up a lot of shots, and they're giving up some good quality. If I was 20 maxing here tonight, I would really be considering Florida one and at least one of them. So I imagine they don't carry any ownership here going into Colorado with a 2.7 total, but perfectly correlated with 18 to 20 minutes and very, 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 very good at 5-on-5 in their time together so far. I don't mind Florida one here. If I'm 20 maxing, add in one. If I'm playing a pile of lineups, maybe I have 1% or 2% the Florida top line, just because perfect correlation with how well they've done at 5-on-5. I think it's a nice high upside, low ownership spot. It's just at that price in single entry, I just think there are other spots I'd rather go to. So single entry, I'd lean more Colorado one, but I think Florida one very firmly in play. All right, last game here. And it is a dandy. Buffalo Sabres, 3.4 total. They're going into Vancouver. The Vancouver Canucks have a 3.3 total. Probably Alex Lyon for Buffalo. Colton Ellis was put on the injured reserve with a concussion, so they're down to 2 goalies. Thatcher Demko making his return for the Canucks. He hasn't played in a while, but he was very good earlier in the season. 903 save percentage in his 10 games. It's not a great save percentage per se, but considering how bad the team is in front of him defensively, he is a bit of a difference maker. Now, the problem here for Vancouver is their penalty kill. They're taking 3.3 penalties per game over the last 5 weeks. It's tied for the 3rd highest rate in the league. On the season, also 3.3 times shorthanded per game, the 4th highest rate in the league. Buffalo's power play, drawing more power play opportunities, or at least a reasonable amount. Certainly above average. Their power play with Josh Doan, we always talk about it, not just above average, legitimately very good with Josh Doan on the top power play. Like, not quite Edmonton territory, but just a step below. This is a great power play matchup for Buffalo. Now, obviously, Thatcher Demko being in net, if he's actually healthy and plays the way he can, he is a difference maker. I will say I'm out on Buffalo 1. I mean, assuming they go back with Tage Thompson, Alex Tuck, and Peyton Krebs, like Peyton Krebs being there is just like, holy hell, man. But considering they won against Edmonton the other night, I don't imagine they're going to change up their lines. I'm not playing a Buffalo top line with Peyton Krebs on it. If you guys want to, fill your boots. It's the Buffalo second line that's interesting to me here. Tyson Kozak, Josh Doan, Zach Benson. I bring that up because Doan and Benson, both on the top power play unit. That Buffalo second line, 10,400. Doan and Benson haven't played that much together this season. You know, it's only been a few games worth of 5-on-5 ice time. Offense has been great in those games. Josh Doan, 27 shots and 10 points in his last 10 games. 10,400, they're a super cheap filler you can put in if you're playing Colorado, if you're playing Edmonton power play, if you're playing Carolina. Obviously, they're going to get middle 6 matchups from Vancouver. I don't know if anybody's looked at the Vancouver defensive numbers recently, but it's an absolute bloodbath. They are terrible defensively at 5-on-5, especially with their top guys off the ice. At 10,400 with 2 guys on a top power play, that is in a great spot. I really do like Buffalo 2 here, the line of Kozak, Doan, and Benson. Now, if you want to take out Kozak and put in Tage Thompson, I think you can do that just because it is such a good power play spot. And Thompson's still shooting the puck a fair bit. He has 30 shots in his last 10 games with 4 goals in that span. So I don't mind taking out Kozak and putting in Thompson, making it a more of a power play stack and more of like a top stack rather than a filler. But I really do like Buffalo 2 as a filler here. On the Vancouver side, God. Vancouver top line, 12,800. David Kampf, Brock Besser, Connor Garland. 3.7 expected goals, 63 shot attempts per 60. Because everybody's injured, they're playing pretty reasonable minutes. Like at the low end, 17, at the high end, like 22 minutes for Garland. So they're getting a fair bit of ice time. It is still the Buffalo Sabres. They've been pretty horrific on the road. Like, I know they won that game the other night, but they still gave up 3 goals. The road trip, so far on the road trip, they've given up 19 goals in 4 games. And they're not playing they played Edmonton okay, but those other 3 games were against Calgary, Winnipeg, who have 1 line, and the Philadelphia Flyers. Like, they're not playing, Tampa Bay and Dallas and Carolina or whatever. Those aren't great offensive teams. Listen, playing a David Kampf line on a 13-game slate is one of those, do I really want to do this? I just think considering their price and considering the matchup, the Vancouver 1 is in play here, but it's the Buffalo second line that I like best in this game. 2 guys, like I said, 2 guys on the top power play, very cheap. I think that's the direction I would go. Brandon asks, any news on Josh Norris yet? Not going to lie, I haven't been checking Twitter been just trying to get through the show. I did notice they said Alex Lyon was hunched over at morning skate. So he may not start, may be Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, and Brock Besser woke up with some discomfort. He's a game time decision against the Sabres. So I guess you can kind of cancel everything I just said about Vancouver 1 because Besser may not even play tonight. So Buffalo 2 in that game. All right. Defensemen. There are a lot of expensive defensemen on the board. I have Cale Makar number 1. I don't think that's going to be a huge surprise, but he's also 8,200. Rasmus Dahlin number 2. It is a great matchup against Vancouver. Listen, Demko is a concern just because, when he's at his best, he is one of the top 5, top 6 goalies in the NHL. It's just, coming back from injury, how good is he going to be? Don't mind Rasmus Dahlin. Jake Sanderson for Ottawa. They're in a tremendous spot here tonight. Still no Thomas Chabot for the Ottawa Senators. It is a really good power play matchup for him. Sanderson's last 5 games, 25 minutes, 27.5, 31, and 29. So a ton of minutes in a great power play spot. I really do like Jake Sanderson. Also think Quinn Hughes in a good spot here at home against Buffalo. Maybe not as much now that Brock Besser may be out. In the mid-price range, I think Matthew Schaefer makes a ton of sense here. Playing Anaheim, we just saw Pittsburgh kind of speed bag the Ducks a little bit, even if they did lose that game. I think it's a really good environment for Schaefer to rack up the shots and blocks. So I do like Schaefer. Erik Karlsson, I think he's a little bit overpriced, but he's in a great home matchup against Montreal. Don't mind throwing him in with my Pittsburgh stacks. If you want to go a little bit cheaper, Morgan Riley, great matchup at home against San Jose. And mentioned the other day how the Leafs have been activating their defensemen more this season than in prior seasons. So that's good news. Jackson Lacombe, listen, the guy really just not coming up in price. And he did have a slow start to the season, but right now he's on a 3-game point streak. His last 9 games, he has 9 points with a shot bonus and 4 block bonuses in there. So Jackson Lacombe starting to find it, still under 5K in a really good matchup like him. Victor Hedman out. I mean, it was always Darren Radish season, but it's still Darren Radish season. 4,600 on the road against a weakened New Jersey team. Do like Radish. Darnell Nurse at home for Edmonton. The guy puts up peripherals. What can I say? At 4,300 against Detroit, another good spot to do it. Going under 4K, if you don't want to pay up for Makar, I always say Devin Taves firmly in play. Thomas Harley is still under 4K. Not getting top power play time for Dallas. Didn't get a ton of ice time in his return against Winnipeg. That does concern me. 17.5 minutes. Seems like they're really easing him in. But if Harley's under 4K, you do have to consider him. Simon Nemec for New Jersey, as long as he's getting power play time. Adam Pelech, and even 3K for the Islanders. Like, listen, defensemen in that Islanders-Ducks game, whether it's Schaefer, whether it's Lacombe, whether it's Trouba, whether it's Pelech, I do think there are a ton of playable defensemen in that game. It should be a relatively high-paced affair. Alexander Nikishin for Carolina. Again, Carolina getting some good Carolina's secondary power play, getting some good minutes. Don't mind Nikishin. I hate to say it, but John Klingberg, listen, it is a good power play spot for San Jose. I don't like Klingberg as a player. He shouldn't have the role that he has, but he has the role that he has, and he played the cards that you're dealt. So it is what it is. Philip Broberg for St. Louis. He always projects well just because of the minutes that he plays. So he's in. Ben Sherratt, listen, another one of those. I don't really like the player, but he's probably going to have to play a lot of minutes. Assuming Simon Edmondson is out tonight. Philip Hronik, another one of those kind of like Devin Taves, where if you don't want to pay for the expensive guy, you can dip down to him. Matthias Samuelsson also in play from Buffalo. Under 3K, Alex Carrier, now that he's under 3K again, he's certainly in play. Parker Wotherspoon, firmly in play for me from Pittsburgh at 2,700. Charles Edward Dastu, again, with Victor Hedman out, still no McDonough and Chernak, I believe. So, with half the blue line missing, Dastu still getting power play time. Certainly don't mind him for 2,800. Bracco Gudis, just another one of those defensemen from the Anaheim Islanders game. If John Carlson doesn't play tonight, I do like Rasmus Sandin. He might have to see a bigger role, even if it is kind of a tougher matchup. Mario Ferraro, he's been fairly productive for a $2,800 defenseman this season, at least as far as blocks go. Nikita Zadorov for Boston, as long as Charlie McAvoy isn't back. All right, goalies. Obviously, we don't have goalie projections. All things equal, my favorite goalie on the board here tonight is Mackenzie Blackwood, 8,200 at home against Florida. Florida could pop some goals past them, but road back-to-back going into Colorado is a really tough matchup for them. So I do like Blackwood to at least get the win here, and that's worth something. Tristan Jarry for Pittsburgh. Listen, he's having a really good season. He's 8K at home in a very good matchup against Montreal. So I'd rather play Blackwood than Jarry, but if for some reason you need to save a couple $100, I think going down to Jarry is okay. David Riddick. I don't really like stacking against Anaheim, but Anaheim is a team that generates a ton of volume. So Riddick very much live for his saves bonus here at 8,100. I would go Blackwood, Jarry, Riddick, but those are the three goalies I like in the expensive. Amongst the cheaper goalies, I mean, Logan Thompson was a bullet, right? Logan Thompson, 7,500 at home against Carolina. I think that is very, very playable here. Even if he gives up a couple goals, should still be fine. Thatcher Demko is interesting. He's 7,400. Again, when he's on his game, he's one of the better goalies in the league. And Vancouver does give up shot volume, but I do worry about the penalty kill in front of him. I think at 7,400, he's playable, especially against a Sabres team that's been very bad on the road this year. Vancouver's going to win a game. Seems like this is a good matchup to do it. Dan Vladar at home against Vegas. He's only 7,100. Don't necessarily love the matchup against Vegas, but at 7,100, if you need a punt goalie, like there are only so many guys in that range. It's like, do you go to Jonas Korpisalo? Probably not. Philip Gustafson against Dallas? I don't think so. Tarasov going into Colorado is a pass for me. Cam Talbot going into Edmonton is a pass. Like Alex Nedeljkovic, 6,900 against Toronto, I guess is fine. Jacob Fowler, 7,400. If you want to risk him against Pittsburgh, I guess it's okay. But for me, if I really do need a cheap goalie, it is Dan Vladar. Josh is saying that the projections are up. Just going to refresh Stochastic here. Well, I mean, nothing's coming up just yet, but I mean, he's saying that they're up in the Discord. Yeah, Jake put up the CSV projection and ownership in the Discord. So anybody that's a Stochastic member, I'll bring up the Discord real quick. Anybody that's a Stochastic member, head on over to the Discord. He has ownership and line stacks or at least ownership and salaries for NHL. So DraftKings and FanDuel. So at least we have that up. Again, we're going to try to get this solved, or the developers are. I'm not going to do anything. Get this solved as soon as they can. Lock is in 4 hours. So just a heads up there. That's it for today's show. Short slate tomorrow. So we will be back on Saturday. Hat trick pick. You know what? I'm going to go a little bit off the beaten path here. Not too far. I'm going to go to Colorado's second line, but a guy that has been getting some power play time. I'm going to go with Gabriel Landeskog. So Gabriel Landeskog, my hat trick pick. Those are your 13 games for tonight. We will be back on Saturday. Again, check the Discord for updates on news for the projections, ownerships, and top stacks. But we will be in the Discord. We got 13 games ahead of us. We got more games on Saturday. Until then, good luck tonight, everybody.